Luke would never say that. I'm sorry. Well, in this version, see, I'm talking about the George Lucas Star Wars. This is the next generation of Star Wars. So I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker.
That quote sums up problem number uno with Luke Skywalker in this movie. It is not the character we know and love from Return of the Jedi. In this video, I'll quickly recap the events in the movie and then go deeper into the changed character and why, from a storytelling sense, Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is a badly advertised old car. Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is a defeated old man who has cut himself from the Force and wants to be left alone. He asks no questions about the lightsaber that Rey hands to him. No, he tosses it over his shoulder. It's only when Chewbacca smashes down the locked door of his hut Luke's attention is finally caught. Over the course of the movie, we see Rey first trying to convince Luke to train her. She wants someone to show her her place in all this, but Luke isn't down for that. Only R2-D2 ultimately manages to convince him, but he quickly backs out again when Rey displays her power. This takes Luke back to when his Jedi temple was destroyed by Kylo Ren, still going by Ben Solo at the time. And he says, "I've seen this raw power only once before, but I wasn't scared of it enough then. I am now." Meanwhile, Rey has conversations with Ben through the Force and becomes curious as to what happened between Ben and Luke. After some he said, she said, Luke eventually submits. He tells of the night he decided to confront Ben. Luke apparently saw a darkness within Ben Solo that was enough to prompt the desire to kill his nephew. Mind you, it was an intrusive thought. It passed as quickly as it came. But Luke did turn his lightsaber on, and that is when Ben wakes up. He sees Luke standing over him and responds with aggression. Ben went on to crash the hut onto Luke and then destroyed the temple and killed nearly all of its students, or all of them, it's not really clear. Anyway, Kylo Ren was born.
Go away!
Now what I see returning again and again as the most egregious offense is that Luke contemplated killing his nephew. Granted, it was only for a short moment, but people don't buy into the fact that the thought even came to him at all. Common argument is that it makes no sense. He went out of his way to try and redeem Darth Vader because he turned out to be his father. But he doesn't do the same with Kylo Ren, who is his nephew. Secondly, people don't buy into the fact that after his Jedi temple was destroyed, Luke would simply become a negative Nancy and abandon everything to sulk on some distant planet. A counter-argument to this is that Yoda and Obi-Wan did the same in Revenge of the Sith. The difference is that they didn't hesitate to rejoin the fight when Luke came knocking on their door, or in Obi-Wan's case, Leia came knocking through a hologram. I would go even as far as to say that their choice to go into exile in Revenge of the Sith was more in the realms of a tactical retreat, rather than abandoning a cause and go sulk somewhere. The reasons above is why Mark Hamill continuously stated in interviews that he disagreed with Rian Johnson's take on Luke. Jedi don't give up, he kept repeating. Perhaps that is true, but I would sooner say that Luke doesn't give up. It's not in his character, and that is exactly the problem.
Because I was Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master.
All these actions from Luke in The Last Jedi are simply not in line with how we as an audience know Luke Skywalker to be. The Luke Skywalker we left behind in Return of the Jedi was an optimistic pillar of good. He had fully grown into Jedi knighthood and became a noble man and a man of integrity. Now, 30 years later, there is nothing left, all supposedly because he saw his nephew leaning more and more towards the dark side. This is all due to Snoke, although we don't get to see how. All of this is shown in a number of considerably short flashbacks. You see, for such a radical change in character to work, you'll need to take your time and explore how that happened. Yes, the movie makes an attempt to explain how Luke's change happened, but it is rushed and shallow. It brushes the surface of this conflict and never allows the story, or rather backstory, to jump into the deep and take its sweet time to tell the tale. Kylo Ren is at the center of this new trilogy, even more so now that Snoke is dead. Spoiler alert. This movie badly wants to establish an interesting dynamic between Rey and Kylo, but it doesn't take the time and effort to lay down the groundwork. properly exploring why your characters are the way they are is essential for the audience to be invested in them, and in The Last Jedi's case, for Rey to connect with Kylo the way she does. But by not properly exploring the origins of Kylo Ren, the movie simultaneously fails in exploring the drastic change of Luke Skywalker. This is a movie, so we need to see things happen. Most of the history between Luke and Ben is told by either Ben or Luke. It is bold of Rian Johnson to alter Luke in such a way, I'll give him credit for that. But sadly, he rushes through a plot that is way more important for both this movie and this trilogy than Johnson gives it credit for. I think the number one mistake Johnson made was not treating Luke as an entirely new character. The man carries the name Luke Skywalker, so by default you'd think he would need no introduction. And you'd be right. In Leia's case and in Han's case we did not need it, but only because they weren't radically different from what we knew them to be in the original trilogy. And Luke is. Just the name isn't enough for the audience to reconnect with him. We, justifiably if I may say, expected the character we knew, or at least something close to it. To have the Luke we were given in The Last Jedi is not the mistake though. The mistake was made when the movie decided not to spend time on familiarizing the audience with this new Luke and telling us, visually, how the man changed. Like I said, Luke Skywalker is a badly advertised car. The movie failed to sell us this new Luke. But even more importantly, like Mark Hamill said, he's Jake Skywalker. People don't reject this version of Luke because he's bitter or old or because he tried to murder his nephew. People reject this Luke because the movie fails to apply the proper storytelling mechanisms to make those actions believable. Telling a story is like being a museum guide. You don't need to hold your audience's hand, but rather you guide them and you show them the proper pieces in the proper order for just the proper amount of time. It is a shame, because I honestly believe that the Luke-Rey-Ben dynamic was always supposed to be the heart of this movie. And it could have been something really intimate and interesting, full of character-driven tension and conflict. Sadly, it isn't allowed to evolve into that, mainly due to other distractions. Canto bite.
Is it true? Did you try to murder him?
Leave this island now!
I honestly think the movie should have opened with a flashback sequence that takes its sweet time. It would show how Ben Solo began his training under the Luke we know and love from Return of the Jedi. Slowly and gradually, we'd see Ben change. Snoke is invading his mind, much like how Voldemort invades Harry's mind in the Order of the Phoenix. And through the years, Ben grows more and more unstable. Luke tries what he can, just as he did with Darth Vader, but this time, no matter the approach, nothing seems to work. It drives Luke desperate, and that is why he ultimately grows so desperate that he, for a moment, contemplated on murdering his nephew to solve this problem. This sequence could be done in about 10 minutes of screen time. And then, as that sequence ends, we cut to Kylo Ren, who is on his way to Snoke in his supremacy, just like how it happens in the movie. The entire purpose is to gradually ease us, as an audience, into this situation and to familiarize us with the new Luke. It would also have helped us to gain sympathy for Kylo Ren as a character, despite him having murdered Han Solo in the previous movie. While not entirely the same situation, the cinematic trailer for the Knights of the Eternal Throne expansion for the Star Wars MMO The Old Republic has a somewhat similar premise. Most importantly, it does a fantastic job in showing the story rather than telling it in just over 6 minutes. The trailer introduces us to Vaylin, a young girl who is Force sensitive, and not just by a little either. We see her undergoing rigorous training and her becoming familiar with her power, though they clearly are far beyond her control. In the first minutes there are plenty of elements that already evoke sympathy for the girl. Like how she is playful by nature, but she is forced to train all the time. Then the tone of the trailer transitions into a darker theme, having us witness how the girl is forced into rituals likely to harness her strength. In short, it is not a pleasant experience. And the woman, who I think is her mother, tries to help her in the end but fails. Then the trailer ends with the mother encountering the daughter grown into an adult, turned into something completely dark and sinister. Turns out, the girl, Vaylin, is the main antagonist of that particular expansion to the MMO. Yet, before having set a single foot in the game, I feel like I know this character, and I feel a certain investment because I witnessed her change, her suffering, and so I'm able to sympathize with the character she is in the game. I have only shown clips here, but I urge you to watch the trailer in its entirety. Even if you'll never touch the game, it is a great example of the showing instead of telling principle of storytelling. Not a word is spoken within those trailers, but it manages to tell you so many things. Usually the use of flashbacks as the opening of your story is ill-advised. This is mostly because, at the beginning, your readers/viewers are not yet familiar with the characters. Of course, this is Star Wars and this is the second movie in the trilogy. We know Kylo Ren and we definitely know the Luke from Return of the Jedi, so we're safe in that regard. Having that sequence would make Luke's behavior in every scene that follows much more believable. So to conclude, I honestly think people would not have taken as much of an offense to bitter Luke if the movie had taken its sweet time to show us how he changed. Not just have a little flashback of one event with some narration to explain it all, but a good portion of the movie devoted to this character development. Show, don't tell is one of the most vital storytelling elements of a movie, but it counts for books as well. It is the difference between writing Johnny felt sick and writing Johnny's stomach turned just as his eyes seemed to do. Luke saying, "I saw a darkness inside Ben like I've never seen before," is not at all that convincing. If you want to sell this character to your audience, to make us believe in this Luke, show us what he has seen. Show us a young and happy Ben turn into the brooding and conflicted Kylo Ren. Now, I said this would be the last part of the series, and I'm right.
From a certain point of view.
I want to have a bonus entry into this series where I basically look back on all the points I've made in the past 6 parts. Exploring this movie was a lot of fun and still is a lot of fun, but it would feel unfinished if I didn't draw some general conclusions that flow from these 6 parts. Aside from that, I want to add some dishonorable mentions, as it were, things that I didn't feel like making an entirely video over. After that, I want to add my 2 cents and tell you what I would have done with the story after The Force Awakens. However, even after that episode is up and running, I might still return to The Last Jedi on 1 or 2 more occasions. But this will not be to point something out in the movie specifically. Rather, I would do it to address a particular storytelling technique using elements from The Last Jedi as examples to strengthen my point. I thank you again so much for watching. I truly enjoy doing this and I hope you truly enjoy watching these. Again, if you do not agree with my stance on this, feel free to voice your own opinion in a comment section. I love a good discussion about storytelling. Consider liking this video and subscribing if you want to see more. That's it for now. Until the next story. Bye bye.